Andy Kemp is Executive Director of the Bidfood Group and a long-standing champion of increased funding for the school meal service. He also made the list as one of public sector catering's most influential and has agreed to take time from his busy schedule to talk about some of the issues facing the industry. Hello, Andy, and thank you for your time today.
Good morning. Good to speak to you.
I guess we'll get straight in with the number one question. From your point of view, what are the biggest challenges facing caterers in 2023?
Well, I suppose we've had unprecedented challenges in this previous year, both as an industry, a country, and globally. And it's also fair to say that there's nothing that's going to be off the cards. If you've learned anything in the last 2 years, I suppose it's to expect the unexpected to enable us to move forward. If I was a betting man, I think the two main challenges that are going to face us and the caterer in 2023 revolve around two key areas. Firstly, the climate crisis. I think this is a huge issue for us and really hitting us hard. And also the increased pressure as a result of the cost of living crisis, which impacts everyone, not only businesses, but the consumers and employees, which has a bounce upon effect across our sectors.
Okay, thank you. I mean, you've obviously singled out, if I can use the term for two things, climate change and cost of living. I mean, is there anything that can be done to help, either from a supplier point of view, government point of view?
There's a lot that can be done. And I think that the first thing, if I look at climate change to begin with, which is a huge risk to food production, and I think that one of the issues that we see within the industry is we see some of the elements, heavy rainfall, extreme heat in the summer and so on and so forth. But for us in distribution, to get food production stable, you have to have stable climates. And that's why we see that as a major issue. I think the IPCC report gave us it's a now or never scenario to look at that. And of course, it's not only things such as the climate, it's also related to things like deforestation, diversity, loss of soil erosion, water scarcity. And this has an effect which interprets itself back as food inflation. And it does have a direct impact on human health. So when you start to look at that, and then you start to look at the scope on emissions, the carbon footprint of manufacturing and distribution, the choice of diet, which has seen us certainly move towards plant food, achieving net zero. I think that one of the issues that we have is that businesses will talk about their work towards sustainable climate management, but in fact, often it's just talk, and it is really about action, to be honest. And consumers have tried to brace themselves for increased costs. And certainly we felt this following the war in the Ukraine. But it's cost, it's food, it's service, and it's the ability to actually get accessible product into our marketplace and maintain that level of stability. And we have to think about how we do that. We have to work closely, I believe, across the market with both our customers and our suppliers, and we all have to sit on the same page. The sad fact is that in the UK, if you read the Food Insecurity Tracker, 25% of households today are experiencing food insecurity as of measured in September. And that means they're having smaller meals. That means they can't afford to feed as they'd like to. We know, and you're very aware of my thinking on universal free school meals and ensuring that these are available to all children so children don't go hungry. And these all sit within this core area.
Okay, now you mentioned lots of talk and little action. What actions could be taken? And perhaps we could just sort of focus in a little bit on the universal infant free school meals issue. You've obviously made some of your own approaches, but are there other things that still could be done to really push the case for this?
I think so. I think I think the issue and the big issue that has bothered me, and that I'm well recorded on this, is that this is not about budgeting. This is not about a government budget. It's not about tax revenue. This is about pulling together a sustainable future for the next generation. And the issue that I find is that the people that need to pull together is not just local authorities or great players like yourselves in public sector. It is about everyone. If anyone's working in healthcare, they will recognize as healthcare professionals the importance of good, healthy food for, I suppose, recovery in hospitals or stability in care homes. And we know certainly within schools for retention of knowledge. If you then look at areas where there's less wealth and there's high levels of deprivation, then these are the children who are going to be absolutely in the greater need to have this kind of support. And so therefore, you could easily argue that anyone that's living in a area of, I suppose, high unemployment or low income is likely to have less chance to succeed educationally than someone that lives in a wealthy area. So to me, it is about the education teams. It's about anyone that's in food production and food service and the distribution of that. It's about anyone working in healthcare. And it's certainly, around anyone working within social care. And if anyone started to then measure the cost of this, then, we have a problem. I don't know who once said, and I can't remember the name of the philosopher, that talked about, measuring the cost of management and education across marketplaces. His comment was, you're better to measure the levels of ignorance and what that costs you.
Okay, very, very wise point. Obviously, the collaboration and discussion and talk can benefit everyone and take you so far, but in many cases, it seems like the solution or part of it is going to come down to government decisions on spending. Is there any sort of one particular decision that you would like to see them make that you think would perhaps have the most benefit to everyone?
I believe now, having campaigned for so long against this with many, many, many fantastic people within our industry doing the same, that the only way we're going to start to move forward is when this sits on a government manifesto for the next government that's going to come into power. Because I believe, rightly or wrongly, that irrelevant of the party, governments only ever sit and think 5 years. And I think one of the issues around, taking schools, for example, healthy education and the values you can get by feeding children correctly and making sure they have the right levels of nutrition and hydration, it's not going to affect the next couple of years, but it will affect the next generation. Mm. And I believe that the parties need to get this onto the manifesto. I think once they do that and the electorate understands it, they'll move forward, because I do believe that there is a north-south divide. I do definitely believe that there's a requirement for proper levelling up. And I believe that too many people don't see this as an absolute high priority yet.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to a slightly different topic. I mean, you have many years of experience in the industry. You're probably as well placed as anyone to sort of make an assessment really about how important collaboration can be. And I'm thinking, not just within a school sector or the healthcare sector, but throughout the public sector and even beyond. Just how much benefit can be gained by talking and collaborating with colleagues in sort of similar industries?
I think it's massive. I think it's absolutely massive. And I think that it's very, very important for companies to do this. You will know during the height of the pandemic that Bid Food and Breaks, two major competitors, collaborated with distributing to 1.5 million vulnerable people with boxes of food. We couldn't have done that ourselves. Our competitor Break couldn't have done it themselves. We could manage that together, which we did. And it made a big difference. And you can do things such as this. In a changing market, in a marketplace that is unstable, and certainly the war in Ukraine has created this instability, one has to collaborate. You know, there's no point sitting on a square, being an island, and hoping that everything's going to be okay. We have to start to think about where we move and how we do that together, and how we face, I believe, the right movements of positivity in certain areas as single groups. And, you know, Bid Food is not an island. And frankly, and you will know better than anybody else, that when I speak regularly, I very rarely talk about my business. I talk about my sector. And therefore, I see myself as a player within a sector. And I think that this helps us, and certainly with many of the manufacturer partners, it helps them. And without any question of a doubt, whether you're in a wholesale marketplace or retail, the more you work as one, the better it is. And the more that you start to do things together, the better it is. You know, and some of these happen through legislation, reduction of salt, reduction of sugar, use of oils, and so on and so forth. Some of these happen outside of that. The players that have a lot of influence without recognizing it are often the industry bodies such as LASA. They have a huge influence across the marketplace. Sometimes their influence isn't realized, but it's huge. It's, you know, and we have to use those. The Food and Drink Federation is another body that has an influence on manufacturing and government as to what the laws should be, could be, or how they could be moved forward. It also happens again with packaging when you start to look at what's happening within those bodies. And you also start to see this with food manufacturers who sit under certain codes of practice that enable us to move forward. I think that, again, this becomes even more important, particularly now that we're out of the EU, where there has to be a collaboration against the standards that we offer within our industry, and certainly not looking for cheap shortcuts.
Okay, thank you. And finally, just amid all the doom and gloom that we seem to hear so much about, do you see any reasons for optimism looking at the year ahead?
I'm a natural optimist, so yes, I do. I believe that we are beginning to move in the right direction. I mean, inflation has bothered me a lot, and there cannot be a sector more hit on this than public sector, because they don't have a capability of raising cash anywhere else. You know, if you're sitting in a commercial restaurant or a hotel, quite frankly, you just put your prices up. You can't do that if you're a prison, if you're a hospital, if you're a school or a university. And I think what's happened is that people have recognized this and have started to look together into how they can find differing solutions, whether this is looking to go to central production kitchens, whether it's looking at food pre-manufactured to work to the right level. Areas I can think of that this would cover would be things like dysphasic food, which is incredibly expensive to produce. You may only have a few members in a nursing home that need that requirement, or a hospital, and therefore to find a pre-produced product is a good thing, I believe, and there's less waste. And certainly I think the sharing of menus, recipes, knowledge, and so on and so forth is absolutely right. You've just got to look at the web. I do believe the cost of living crisis has forced everybody within the industry to think differently. You know, so the days of picking up the phone and asking for half a dozen things to be there tomorrow have gone away. People are communicating more. I believe that we're using a lot more technology than we did before. And as a consequence, that does take out costs, and people are investing heavily now in technology. I think that the operators that are producing food are making major operational changes that allow them to deliver in a much smoother and more effective way. And there seems to be a greater understanding, I hope, on the requirement of staff coming through if we're going to build our economy, and people are beginning, particularly at government level, to consider what are the solutions to enable us to get a lot more people back into our industry that can enable us to draw some breath and start to build a better future. So I think all of those are positive. And I do believe one of the bigger positives have been that high inflation has actually seen a realignment on salaries. And I think we're beginning to see at the lower ends a movement up on the payment scales, which is so necessary for two reasons, really. One, that our employees are living in an affordable life within our sector. And we all know what's going on with the strikes at this moment in time. And secondly, that people can start to have a better standard of living. And I think these are all being highlighted massively today. And I think they're positive things. I don't believe being on strike is positive, but sometimes you have to have positive action to get positive results.
Andy Kemp, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.